I'm sitting here with Michael, Uwemedimo, and we're going to talk a little bit about a mutual interest that we have about doing using film as part of a practice of representing African cities, but also as part of research. And Michael is far more experienced than me, so it's a great honor to be able to have him here today. So Michael, I would like you to describe a little bit about your practice and work that you've been doing in Port Harcourt, and if that's your central location now, it would be good if you can tell us a little bit about your work there.
So I actually came at it almost the other way around. Rather than bringing film to cities, I came from a film looking to bring cities to film in a certain way, looking to use some of the techniques we'd explored in filmmaking to explore the creation of public space and different forms of urban belonging, exploring different forms of urban belonging. So just briefly, Port Harcourt is the oil capital of Nigeria. It's a city in the creeks. It's a city that was established as a staging post for the extraction of colonial plunder, dark cargo, first of all human beings, but then coal. It was the railway terminus from Enugu for coal, and then the deep water port to take that coal around the coast, and then oil. So it's a frontier town, a town of extraction, and that violence, the material violence of extraction and the social violence of segregation as a colonial artifact is inscribed in the original town plan, segregated space. So the city went through a period of explosive growth in the 80s, and a rapid urbanization process led to a massive urbanization of poverty, and the fastest growing areas of the city were informal slums, waterfront slums around the fringes of the creeks that the city is set in. And in 2009, the governor declared all these settlements, about 49 of them, home to nearly 500,000 people, declared them all for demolition, and started a process when 19,000 people lost their homes in a single weekend. And I was at that demolition because Amnesty International had asked me to produce a video report on forced evictions, and I found myself in this massive demolition, and something peculiar happened, that as people were seeing their houses destroyed and seeing me with the camera, they started directing me, telling me to film this, film that. And I had a group of people around me taking me through this demolition, protecting me from the police, helping me escape, and asking me to film and speaking directly to the camera. And it was that moment when people recognized this camera as an instrument that they could use to tell their own stories, to frame what was important to them, that I think was the animating impulse of the project.
And you were saying a very beautifully put that you came from a film to the city, yeah? And the film you're talking about is the film Act of Killing.
Yeah, so the film, The Act of Killing, came out of a 10-year project developed by a film collective called Vision Machine and led in many ways by Joshua Oppenheimer, who directed The Act of Killing and The Look of Silence afterwards. And in that process, we'd been exploring the space of fiction film production, the apparatus of fiction film production, as a space in which to insert a documentary cinema. So the whole drama of filmmaking, the social labor of filmmaking, would allow us to capture certain kinds of relationships and certain elements that we couldn't necessarily have captured otherwise. And that particular project was looking at the Indonesian genocide. So it was coming out of that project, I was keen to look at the productive power of stories and the interaction of the imaginary and the real, looking to explore that in space, in cities, looking at the city as a representational space.
And have you, so then we're moving, because there is some resemblance to the work that I've been doing with my co-worker Jakob van Heerland in this film One Table, Two Elephants that which is taking place here in Cape Town. In this, in both the parallel of kind of the colonial remains, or kind of the way that the racialized city and and how it was so configured through this violence. And Cape Town is called the mother city in a very loving way, but it's the mother city, it's the ground zero of colonization in the southern Africa, and filming. So part of our work was also how do you bring not the visual necessarily into the filmic, but those silenced histories and kind of those pushed away histories. How is that possible to use the cinematic or the kind of the filmic register as a way of doing that? Because we're very used as scholars, I come from writing, as many do. And so our project is about, how do we use that cinematic, that filmic, and not just as has been done very much in social anthropology, which has been the camera as an objective kind of tool somehow. It was a more scientific, almost, are we registering like as it is somehow, but rather learning from, so our peers is not just the academics, but also the filmmakers, and also the inventions through which fiction film elaborated and created this the wide register through which we can engage these realities. So does that resonate somehow with how you phrased it before?
Well, it does actually. One of the inspirations, or one of the models that fed into Vision Machine at an early stage was an anthropologist, was a visual anthropologist, a French ethnographer called Jean Rouch.
Yeah, we know him very well.
So it was this idea of a shared anthropology, of postcards from the imagination, of the interplay of narrative and history. History is the story of things that happened, and history is the things that happened, and the way in which the imaginary and the real constitute each other. That was really important for us, and the role of reenactment as well, of staging, and of course Rouch's fundamental kind of insight that the camera is a catalyst, is an accelerator.
I'm excited that we're meeting each other, because this I have a lot to learn from you, but it resonates some of the things that we've been also experiencing. We've been working with groups that we've been working with here in Cape Town. On one hand, we've been following biologists, and ecologists, but on the other hand, also artists, dancers, hip hoppers, and the camera becomes not just we holding it many times, but we're not the only filmmakers kind of in the room. So there is a kind of a collaborative process in the way of making the film. In our process, of course, we have then edited it, and we still take responsibility for the film as it's later now when it's cut as it's said. So we can so we become the authors in that sense. It is an authored piece, but we still rely upon, and we feel that we have good relationships with the people we've been working with as co-knowers. So is that a process how do you do if you make a film, or maybe there's something else to your practice that is not just a film? So
well, wondering about. Actually, at the centre of the Human City project, our current project in Port Harcourt, is not so much vision as voice. It's a radio station. It's in many ways the core of the project. And one of my collaborators, Anna Bonaldo, left the BBC after 10 years because she had been working to tell many people's stories, often powerfully, expertly, but she wanted to contribute to a space in which people could tell their own stories and create a platform in which they could give voice to their own vision of the city. So everything we do necessarily is collaborative. I mean, it's our project only in as much as I'm the one talking to you now here in this particular element of the project. You know, I articulate this particular connection. But you can't make an organization, you can't make an institution, you can't make a community radio station, you can't make a media center in a facility, you can't build spaces which necessarily rely on lots of people unless it's a collaboration. And in many respects, that has been true of film, perhaps less so now when one person can just make a film quite easily. But film, too, traditionally has been a collaborative process. It's been a social labour.
Yeah. And I think before we move into the, because I had another question was around, filmmakers in African cities and the networks that might be and so forth. But before that, we mentioned, or you mentioned also public space, and I seem to, if you produce images and kind of you can get them in circulation, it's a form of creating a publicness. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, for us, it's very concrete. We have an inflatable mobile cinema, pop-up cinema. So when we screen, we gather people. We create a public space. It's quite literal. And one of the drivers of our project is this desire to create a productive relationship between the co-production of public discourse and the co-production of public space. So that has an architectural component. So in the media centre that we've designed, to get a civic scale building into a really dense slum, we've had to cantilever the building, float half of it on water and float the other half in the air. So the radio studios literally open up a space, create space beneath them. So you have the studios as a space of open public debate, and beneath them you have an open public space. So it's quite literal.
Yeah. So, and it's both literal, but also in the sense, kind of performative, in the sense that people listen to this, and there's also people from the city that participates. But let's move over then to what can because we are interested in using some of our work to connect with other practitioners and other kind of filmmakers in African cities. We have a third project coming up in Kampala in Uganda, where we have a research project and a component will be on filming. Where Joel Ongwek is a local or kind of a Kampalan filmmaker. But I'm still, what kind of networks already exist? What kind of hubs? Is there a case to be made in order that we can bring them together somehow? Could we be facilitators to fund these types of networks, and so forth? How much do you know about this?
This is why I was slightly amused when you said you had a lot to learn from me, because I certainly have more to learn from you. I mean, for the past 9 years, I've basically just had my head down in this project, just trying to hold it together and keep the wheels on the wagon. And I'm sure you know a lot more about contemporary networks of African filmmakers. I can talk a lot about sort of 1960s film or whatever 1920s film. So I have the sense that there's emerging a really vibrant, live network of people, and one of the things we're trying to do is to create a space for them, a space in which they can emerge, appear, and a space in which their cities can appear for them.
Because I just came now from filming in Durban for 2 weeks, and we've done another 2-week film period in September. And now we met with, and they're in the city of Durban. So Durban is, a big city, a port city, and the built kind of central city used to be the home of white capital. That was the city. And then with, just as happened to Johannesburg, which didn't really happen in Cape Town, but the white capital just fled, when apartheid crumbled. And then they built their own new city in Umhlanga, which is up the coast. And so now you have this amazing, it's like this, it's almost like it's a big city that is walkable. And it's like an Afropolis, like the city of Asania that should have been there all along somehow. So it's a really amazing place to be in, and it's such a vibe. And you meet with these young students and other young black women and men that are really have some kind of self-confidence, that they, something's going to happen. And when we met with several filmmakers, like really young, we said, you need to film this, because they can do another very different film than what I can do. So this is why it's important to, where should we go? How should we configure this in order to find, to build this type of capacities? And of course, we're not the only one. They have the Durban Film Festival, and they have, here in South Africa, and in Kampala seems to be less. But I'm just saying that we should put our heads together. And I don't know much more than you, but I think that's one of the things that I would like to come out of.
It would be fun
in the long term, because it's a long-term commitment.
Sure, and I think it's something that we could probably find resourcing for.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yes.
Partners and platforms.
And it sits with, have you met? I'm not sure if you met Tata Wenga, who's the designer behind the Cityscapes magazine.
Only via email.
Yeah, so he's the kind of guy who, that what Cityscapes magazine has done, kind of in the written, kind of in the publishable form, to kind of represent this type of urbanism in a very different kind of register that kind of circulates in different circles, and it kind of becomes a self-representation, which is also very powerful and powerful. Is what could also, and now he's also moving into film, apparently. So we have a certain collaborator that we should kind of sit down and do.
Let's do something fun. I mean, I saw my first black magic camera in the flesh in Lagos. I saw the first red camera in Lagos. So, there's just production bristling up everywhere, and people with phones. And it's almost trite to say now, of course, that production capacity, the capacity of visualization that people have in their pockets is just kind of...
Did you know that in Kampala they're making these kind of martial arts films in the former settlements? So they're because they have schools, so they use that to engage the youth. So they have something martial arts. And then there was someone who started, I don't know the story, but we were at the film festival because our friend Joel, he presented one of his documentaries, and then we met this group of they're doing these like really violent films.
Did someone make a film about the making of those films?
Maybe.
It rings a bell. Sort of martial arts films and westerns. I'm sure I saw a making of.
And it's the playfulness which the representation of Africa needs in that sense. That is because we know the doom and gloom and the dysfunction and all that. But there's something else also where I think this type of film making can play a role. So Michael, now. Because you gave your keynote today, and here at the African Centre for Cities International Urban Conference in Cape Town, and could you mention a good meeting that you had during your conference days?
I was really excited to meet Raoul from Toro Lab. I was sitting in Port Harcourt reading about Toro Lab, thinking, maybe when we grow up, we could be like Toro Lab. That was fun. He's a scream. And it was also great to meet Joy Mboya from the Godan Arts Centre in Nairobi. We were in the same session, so it was wonderful to see our images and hear our sounds side by side. Yeah,
that's good. So with that, Michael, I want to thank you for this interview, and it's been a pleasure.
It's been fun.
And I thank everyone for tuning in.